React, a film podcast where we talk about movies and shows that we love. We're your hosts. I am Randissimo, here with
Agent Smith.
And today we have another good review coming your way. This time, Judas and the Black Messiah. This one dropped. Maybe was it last month or so? It's on HBO Max currently. It's been on my radar for the longest time, and really happy we can finally dive into this.
This movie, oh man. So I knew very little about it. I obviously knew it was out, but you had recommended it to me. You're like, hey, let's totally do this for the next episode. I was like, absolutely. Seems like a nice contrast to the last week's episode, which was Willy's Wonderland. Something a little more serious for you guys. But this is probably the most relevant movie I've watched in a long time. And it does a really good job of making you understand just how difficult life was for minorities back in the 60s and 70s. And we'll get into the spoilery stuff, but yeah, it really kind of punches you in the gut, and it stays so relevant to politics today.
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. It's an extremely relevant movie, and we've had a lot of different kind of movies lately that, for example, Black Klansman, not too dissimilar, dealing with some certain past events, that time trying to invade the KKK membership and find out what they're doing. But all the racist overtones that were present in those days, there was an obvious parallel to what was happening now, and it's sad that a lot of the stuff that you hear the people are struggling through to gain rights that they know they deserve back then. These are words mirrored to what we're saying literally today. Things I've echoed to during protests I went to last year for the Black Lives Matter movement. And yeah, this movie does a great job at not only depicting that era and chapter of the Black Panthers movement, but just what it meant for the individuals who were actually trying to make a difference. So, Judas and the Black Messiah, preemptively, it's a great movie. Definitely recommend it. It's a story that's already out there in the history books, but it definitely had some elements I wasn't aware of. I didn't really know the Judas side of what happened, and it's unfortunate because you would love to kind of rewrite history. But yeah, it's definitely a good movie, definitely timely, and check it out. It's educational at the very least, and it hits you in the feelings, but everyone deserves to see this one.
Yeah, and I was really pleasantly surprised by the cast. We have Ryan Coogler, who produced this film, which is already a huge, stamp for me. I've loved every Coogler film I've seen, and he tends to deal with these kinds of topics that are very relevant in terms of, again, minorities and how they have to face different struggles in their daily lives. So that to me was already a plus. And then you have some well-known actors in this film. You have Daniel Kaluuya, who plays Fred Hampton, the main character. He's the Black Messiah of the movie. And then you have Lakeith Stanfield, who plays William O'Neill, who is the Judas. But these two have worked together in the past. You've seen them in movies like Get Out, where, again, racially charged film, talking about modern-day problems. And again, you see that dynamic in this film. So already a star-studded cast. Everybody's acting in this film was phenomenal. Jesse Plemons, just a universal scumbag in any role he takes. He's just so good at portraying that kind of character. Breaking Bad. What was that other one we recently saw him in?
He's in a few. He was in Game Night, where everyone thought he was a scumbag.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so already just the acting is fantastic, and I learned a lot too. I didn't know much about the history of the Black Panther movement until I saw this film, so it was very educational as well. Just an all-around wonderful film. we'll get more into some stuff with spoilers, obviously, but just overall, expect a film that's going to challenge your views on a lot of modern day, uh, privileges or luxuries that you may have or not. And you're going to be able to clearly see the parallels with politics nowadays versus politics back then. You see it a lot in some of the things that, quote unquote, the Black Messiah talks about. So Fred Hampton, he's talking about how there's one percenters and then everybody else is kind of left struggling and fending for themselves. And, it's not really a black versus white issue. It's more of a poor versus rich issue. So you can clearly see that the directors were trying to talk to us not only about the past, but also about the present and what our potential future may be if we decide not to learn from our history.
Yeah, absolutely. Highly recommended by both, and we'll start to get into spoilers. So, spoilers for Judas and the Black Messiah, now available on HBO Max. So, if you haven't seen it yet, pause this, go to HBO, check it out, come back and hear our insights on it. But yeah, let's just get into it. Yeah, good movie. Good movie. I absolutely love how Daniel portrayed Fred Hampton. Like, his energy, like, it sounded like he captured that accent in that region pretty well, from what I can tell. And his energy, I felt I was being led into a cause that I'm already, constantly involved in anyways. Him just say, I am a revolutionary. I'm like, yes. I was saying it on my couch. Like, yes, me too. Lead me into the streets. So his energy for that character was just perfect. I loved it.
I have a question for you, man. Don't you think it's a little ironic that this was a movie? Because one of the speeches he was listening to, I believe on the record player at a point in the film, was this activist talking. And I think it's the same speech that we've heard used in films before, where it's just like, the revolution will not be televised. I think it's the same person that they listen to in the film, that same person. I don't know the name, so please tell us in the comment section, educate me. But it's just kind of ironic, right? Because it's a film. So quite literally, the revolution is being televised in this particular instance. Even more so with us talking about it on the internet live. It's very televised now. So.
Very, very meta. Very meta. And now it should be televised. It should be televised. But yeah, the character portrayals all across the board. The William FBI informant portrayal, it was good too. It was a simple portrayal, right? It was someone who was out to fend for himself, to get himself over, no matter what it took. So even if it meant infiltrating the Black Panther movement and really betraying not only his own people but the cause at large, him being a huge reason why Fred Hampton died the way he did. There's a lot of what if stories out there that saddens me, because what if instead he joined them ultimately, the Black Panther Party? What could they have accomplished if they didn't have the FBI have a step ahead of them because of that informant? So his kind of betrayal of I'm doing it for me. I am conflicted because I have my selfish motivations, but I'm exposed to such a good cause that, at one point I know it was going to turn out that way. I'm like, oh, maybe he actually joins the Panthers side and doesn't try to conspire to kill Hampton, but he played that role so well. That guy just trying to live that double agent life, feeling the sins you can see in that final scene, for example, of him planning to kill Hampton, but still struggling with it. You could just, like, he's on the verge of tears at that moment because he realizes how important it is that Hampton is kept alive and the movement's kept alive, and he's being a detriment to it. So excellent portrayal on that part too.
Absolutely. One of the things that I really enjoyed about this film was the fact that, to me at the very least, it mentioned how in history this is how we were conquered as minorities, right? We were, once we were conquered, we were taught to compete against one another, right? All of us wanted to escape the oppression that we were feeling. But because everybody was out to get theirs, we were taught that that was the mentality to have. We never worked together to overcome the problem. It was always me versus this person. I don't want to be poor, so I'm going to get what I want by any means necessary. Fuck everybody else, right? That's kind of the mentality that this movie spoke about. Because what happens? In the beginning of the film, you see J. Edgar Hoover, person who founded the FBI, talking to just a giant mass of white FBI agents. And what is he saying? He's saying that this quote-unquote black messiah is single-handedly the most dangerous enemy to their way of life. But when they say their way of life, they really just mean rich, privileged people, right? The luxuries that they have, the benefits they have, they don't want to share them because politically speaking, our system doesn't support it. At least it definitely didn't at that time. So what they were saying is that's really their problem. We have what we want. We have to defend our way of life. And so what happens? You see Lakeith Stanfield's character, William. He gets arrested in the beginning of the film because he pretends to be an FBI agent in order to steal cars, right? He boosts cars this way. He makes these people believe he's an agent, and he just takes off. Now, again, it's already starting to show how in poverty, we tend to fight each other, right? We fight each other. We steal from each other. We are violent towards one another. And then that's all we know, right? That's how we survive, quote unquote. And then he gets arrested. And what does the FBI agent do? He makes him turn on his own people. He makes him an undercover, informant. And that to me kind of struck a chord because again, that's what we see in history. We see that dividing and that conquering. And so our own people are the ones infiltrating our groups, but only because of necessity. And this movie explores the theme of what a person's legacy is. Is it the last thing you know about them? Is it them killing a cop? Is it them betraying a group of a movement like the Black Panthers? Or is there more to it than that? Is there more to someone's life? Why is it that we ignore everything else that they did and we only focus on the one bad thing, right? Or at least the last thing they did. Recency bias, right? So to me, that hit kind of deep, just seeing how due to necessity and the fact that we are poor, we can be manipulated to do something like turn against each other. And that's just another form of control.
Yeah.
And this whole film deals with control and how we're kept in order, even though we are the masses, we are the people, and yet we're taught that we're powerless, and we're actually not. We're actually the complete opposite. We run the show, essentially. So that was one of the bigger messages from this film that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, the genesis of the William informant character is based out of that systemic racism. People were placed in ghettos, given way less opportunities than someone who's a white and a male person, and therefore they create generations that are directed towards poverty. We have to fight against the current to get out of poverty. And people talk about things like black on black crime. Our neighbors are black, so when people are impoverished, sometimes they try to do whatever they can to better their situation, and sometimes it's to the detriment of their neighbor. And that's definitely what the William character was, how I felt. I don't know his actual history beyond this Black Panther era, but that's what I felt from that. Like, yeah, that's a victim in of itself who's then using his own victimized situation to victimize other people. And the foil between him becoming a close comrade to Fred Hampton's character is Fred has the opposite direction. He's utilizing his voice not to just better himself, but literally just a generation of people who are suppressed by capitalism. And I like that angle too. It was obviously there is an issue with race specifically. Obviously, explicitly, even in this movie, one FBI agent says to the Jesse character, like, "What are you going to do when your daughter brings home a black man?" You know, because that was his greatest fear, and that was the greatest example he could bring up. Is like, worst case scenario, our kids start to date black people, and that was the mentality of a lot of people back then. So there's obviously a race component. But what I loved about Fred Hampton's journey that they depicted in this movie was he went to different coalitions of different creeds and backgrounds of people and letting them know we're all actually fighting the same person, or at least we should be. You know, he started out with the crowns, going to the crowns and saying, hey, I know we have different maybe core philosophies, but there's no reason for us to not be able to work together. Imagine what we could do if the crowns and the Panther movement, they all combined. And then he went towards a white church place that was, had a Confederate flag on the wall. And I expected way more conflict there. But I love that. Here are the examples of, listen, even if they don't suffer the same way black people do, you're still poor too, right? You still have the same foot on your throat that we do. Cops beat your ass too, right? Why not join us? Join us. He did the same thing with the Hispanic faction. So he formed that Rainbow Coalition. And that was a beautiful thing to see that depicted in that way, how this could have been a way bigger movement ultimately if it wasn't for the untimely death of Fred. Because, yeah, the FBI, they set out to kill him because they knew that in all these other places around the world where revolutions happen, you need the leader and you need the people to believe the words, believe the actions, and that's what was happening. So if you destroy their hope, then you put a pause to that movement. But yeah, the way Daniel portrayed that character was beautiful, because yeah, that's what it was. Someone pushing that agenda of we don't have these rights because of what we look like and what we make, but we should have these rights. So let's feed the community. Let's start that medical clinic in Chicago where there's so much problems already. Literally just trying to help the community with, I think the quote was like, let's not fight, white capitalism with black capitalism. Let's fight capitalism with socialism, which is a sentiment I agree with great vigor. Because it was about that. Let's give the community shit they need. Education and medicine. Let's start there and bring people together and then protect people from cops. So I love the vision that Fred Hampton had that they depicted on screen. And yeah, it's a tragedy because you're doing exactly what his story's headed.
Exactly. And that's that specific scene with the Rainbow Coalition I really enjoy, because that reaffirms what you were saying in the beginning when he was talking about fighting white capitalism with socialism instead of black capitalism. Because again, at that point, that's where you begin to see the parallels with current day politics, right? It's classism. It's all classism. It's not really race versus race, right? Because when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, and you can tell us in the comment section if you disagree, it's more about economics, right? It's those who have trying to keep what they have and hoard what they have versus those who greatly have nothing, right? Like almost nothing. And so they have to fight tooth and nail just to get a little bit, while the complete other end of the spectrum has far too much. And he did a really good job of portraying that overall message for me. That was, bar none, one of my favorite things. Now, the ending is a little bleak because what happens to the Black Panther movement. It dissolves in 1978. Their Black Messiah gets murdered, right? He dies. But I think the overall hopeful message to this film / silver lining is that you can't, and they say this over and over again in the movie, you can't kill a revolution. You can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill people's desire for equality. You can't get rid of all the people, right? Because we are what make the country. We are what creates a nation. It's not the government, it's us. And we have all the power, we just don't know it, or we're too afraid to pursue the things that we deserve as human beings. So that was the hopeful message for me, that even though he died, the fact that we can see this film and then look in our current day and see the progress we've made, even though there's still a lot more to be made, was refreshing to me. It also does a great job of saying, don't forget what it takes for progress. It takes you putting fear aside. It takes you, potentially thinking of others besides yourself, your own vested interest. It's a group challenge, and we have to keep fighting. So that is the ultimate hopeful message I got from this movie. But there is one thing I wanted to ask you, man. And this is something I debated with when I was watching the film. But Jesse Plemons' character, to me, it gave me the impression that he saw the Black Panther movement through a certain lens. And it wasn't the exact lens that his peers saw it through, right? To me, yes, he believed that the Black Panther movement was a terrorist organization. But I don't think he truly believed until he was forced to at the end. Well, I say forced, he chose to do it anyways, but I don't think he was as racist as his cohorts, I guess is the best way I could put it. Sure, he might have been on the fence. He wasn't sure about it, but compared to his peers, his other fellow agents, and Hoover, who explicitly stated, hey, we can't allow intermingling to happen. That's just horrible. That's going to destroy our way of life. He seemed more on the fence about it, at least from my impression. What did you think before that, that slow metamorphosis of his where he just becomes exactly what J. Edgar Hoover had wanted him to be? I think in the beginning, he wasn't like that.
No, I'd say in the beginning he was like that, and he continued to dive deeper into that racist barrel, because the opening of him being introduced to Lakeith's character is, we have to take down a Black Panther movement, and there is only one reason to do that, and it is based out of racism and classism. So I think from the start he was totally on board with trying to do whatever they can to get rid of this movement. So yeah, at the start that just stems from his own racist and classist bias. And even when he was asked the question of like, what will you do when your daughter brings home a black man, his first answer was like, that wouldn't happen. Like that, why would that ever happen? Why would those two streams ever cross? Now, I don't think he was saying that under duress. I do think that was like in his heart, he never thought about his white daughters potentially dating people who were black before. And that stems from just existing racism. So I'll say he didn't want to kill everyone in the Black Panther Party. I think that was pretty much his difference. Like, well, let's just lock them up. And I think he was probably uncomfortable initially with the idea of killing people in the Black Party. Definitely the whole Fred Hampton assassination stressed him out. But yeah, ultimately I'd say he went from, he's racist to he's accepting the worst places racists go, which is to kill the people who don't look like them. So that's my take on his character. Racist turned way more murdery racist.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was pretty, for me, it was vague, at least to a certain degree. Totally let us know what you think. But one of the other things I wanted to talk about for this film was the fact that it shows the power that community has. I know, for instance, just to reaffirm this fact, they had burned down the headquarters, the cops of the Black Panthers. And at first you saw the people kind of giving up, right? They're like, oh, this is it. This is over. But then they realize it's just a building and it can be rebuilt. So I really did enjoy the little bits of symbolism in the film as well. That kind of just kept reinforcing that overall message of, you can't destroy the revolution, right? Only you decide, only the people decide when that's over. So I did really enjoy that. One of the things I also really liked was the fact that uh, when he was in jail, they did a really good job of portraying just how that could break someone. And again, it talks about that whole message nowadays where there's way too many minorities incarcerated for really petty crimes, right? And they end up having to stay there. I think they arrested him for what? Taking ice cream, I guess was the charge.
Yep.
They had to find something petty to send him 5 years to prison, and they gave him the maximum sentence. And you see that again today. That hasn't gone away. Now there's a movement potentially to release people who have been incarcerated for smaller crimes like that, but it's still a process, and it's still over 30 years later, and we're still going through it. So I really liked that they included that as well, because that's how you break down people. You throw them in jail, and prison is supposed to be a place of rehabilitation, but instead we treat it like just a place we put people that we want to forget about, or that we deem unfit for society. So I really liked the hopeless atmosphere that they showed when the main character was in jail. But he kept his convictions, right? He used that quote of Martin Luther King saying, "Don't show despair in the land of darkness," or something like that. And he said, "That's the difference between me and that quote. I don't show despair. I just see a new spot to start a revolution." So I really liked that message too in the film.
Yeah, and that whole series of police actively, targeting Black Panthers, burning down their headquarters, locking people up for little to no reason. Yeah, that obviously still happens now, and that's what people in power do to keep people looking for equal power to keep them at bay. We see something interesting and fucked up happening in Rochester with the Daniel Prude case of the cops, from last I checked, being acquitted of being charged with killing Daniel Prude by using excessive force. They killed him, and they're getting away with it. And really, what's happening there, from my perspective, is the protection of the police force. Police force, there's a lot of, I'd say, some underlying gang mentality when it comes to, I'm a cop, you're a cop, cops get protected. So when they kill someone, and it seems to be largely against people of color, they can get away with it way more easier than if any other person were in that situation, because they're cops and because that person was of color. There's an inherent bias of, we need to use force to stop these people, which causes people like George Floyd or Prude to be killed. So the justice system, the legal systems, the cops, the government itself are also complicit in a lot of these heinous actions that are happening now. Happened again, I think it was in California. A Hispanic young man also had a knee on his neck for 5 or plus minutes. He died too. Again, it happens there's cases of white people going through the same thing. So what this film does is it shows that kind of microcosm of how can the government utilize the justice system and the police to get what we want. And in that case, it was to make sure that people involved with the Black Panther movement at all were not seen as honorable people. They weren't seen as people you should listen to. You should fear them because they will threaten your way of life. And that happens today too. And that's the painful part about the movie is it's not like we're watching history that stopped. It's just a part of the history that we're still living through. But I love the focus of Fred. I would take more Fred Hampton movies. I would love different angles of his life. I would love a childhood to now, whatever. But the legacy of Hampton, they went through the whole legacy talk when I forgot the member's name, but he was in a shootout with cops. Yep. He was in a shootout with cops, and the mother was destroyed that her baby was dead, but that his legacy was tied towards killing of cops. And the situation is way larger than that. You know, he was already targeted as someone they wanted to hurt and lock up. He helped the community. He helped fight for black rights and just rights in general to be more equal. So cases like that where people try to bring up some kind of criminal history anytime someone is dead, specifically of color, like, well, you know, that one time they stole like a Kit Kat bar. So, I mean, you know, if you don't want to die, you know, follow the law. And that's the same kind of, you know, media oppression that happens now, too, of you just try to take anything you can and get rid of the good shit they did. And you know, I have people I've talked to where they actually saw the Black Panthers like, aren't they the same as the KKK? And that's infuriating to ever, you know, hear, because they just think, oh, okay, they just want to kill all white people. It's like, no, they want to liberate black and brown people and anyone who's suffering under classism as well. They help the community that way. They help feed the community, nurse them back to health, and educate the community. And there are some violent factors that they had to go up against. That's where the Malcolm X mentality comes, where it's like, well, you know, the pen doesn't always beat the sword if we keep getting killed by the sword, so we need to defend ourselves too. So I like that this movie showed, okay, yeah, there's a time and a place for aggression, unfortunately, but ultimately the movie's about, hey, don't focus on me getting to Cuba. Like, use that money to build that health clinic in Chicago. Think about how many people we can save by using that money to actually help our community. So I love that they focused on that and that perspective from Fred Hampton. And that's something we definitely need more movies like that. So, a small bit before I throw it back to you. I also love when Lakeith was like trying to spit game to someone who was listening to the, you know, the movement's like causes and stuff. And he said, and he just went up to him like, hey, like, these women are objects, man. They're our sisters. They're equal to us in arms. Like, we shouldn't be focusing on trying to mate with everyone we see, every woman we see. They're our fellow soldiers too. They're our fellow outreachers to the community. So treat them accordingly. Treat them with respect. So that kind of all-encompassing, I respect that people might have different philosophies on how to get to a goal, but whether you're the Crowns or you're a white church or a Hispanic coalition, it doesn't matter. We're all should be on an equal footing so that we can get what we deserve, which is equal rights. It's plain and simple.
Exactly. And I think in that particular scene you're mentioning about, you know, the main character, I'm blanking on his name, but they give him a big packet of money, a big envelope of money. I believe the leader of the Crowns gives it to him, and he's like, flee the country. You can do a lot of good somewhere else.
Yeah, Fred.
You won't be dead. Yeah, Fred. Yeah. And he's like, no, this is ridiculous. Take this money. We can feed and help a ton of people with this. And on top of that, name the clinic in honor of our fellow brother who just got murdered by cops. And they're saying he's a cop killer. And I love that. Yep. Because, again, he promised the mother of that person who was talking about how it was a shame and unfair that was the last legacy he would leave behind in the eyes of the people. He's like, no, we're going to fix that. I promise you we'll fix that. And then he did exactly that. And I really enjoy that. I'm a firm believer that people should never be judged by the worst thing they've ever done. And I feel like we tend to ostracize each other just a little bit too much and a little bit too easily, in my honest opinion. So I really like that scene in the film. And it's funny that you mentioned the KKK comparison, because they actually use that in the film. The FBI agent played by Jesse Plemons uses that to say to Lakeith Stanfield's character, William, he's like, hey, they're just like the KKK. Look how they brutally murder, informants that we've had, and these acts of violence. They're cop killers. That's not the solution. So you agree with us, right? And again, it was just a form of manipulation. That's how they got Lakeith's character to comply. So I did like that you mentioned that, because it's a direct example used in the film. And just really the last thing I want to talk about in terms of what you were mentioning just a little bit earlier. We look at current events, and again, you see a lot of poor people and minorities in prisons, and they're given the maximum penalty for things that anybody with a half decent lawyer and a little bit more privilege would probably get a much lighter sentence. And look what happens nowadays, right? We've had peaceful protests. Yes, I'm not saying the violence does not occur, but again, we have a habit of bunching everybody together based on the actions of a few. And it's not even fairly, we do it unfairly. So look at all the recent politics we've seen on the news, right? We've seen people peacefully protesting for the most part. And then if they're protesting something like police brutality, they'll rain on them hellfire, use tear gas, use excessive force, nothing happens. But with our ex-president, he's easily able to engage in several controversial actions and nothing happens, right? So how is it that people are being treated fairly nowadays when you can clearly see that for lesser actions, we get the book thrown at us? Whereas for people with more privilege, they can almost essentially do whatever the hell they want and people praise them for it. So that's really what this movie is trying to tell us is, hey guys, it's not over. The things we're talking about in this film are things that are still happening to you. And they may not happen to you to the same extent as they're depicted in this film. But remember, this is about more than yourself. This is about you as a community, you as a people. So show a little bit more compassion, show a little bit more understanding and knowledge about the things everyone is going through collectively, and keep fighting.
Yeah.
That was really the overall message for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we mentioned before, the whole you can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. And so many important leaders for that movement have died and been murdered. You know, MLK, Malcolm, Fred, they've been assassinated because people want to stop the movement. And I feel like people on various sides get a little scared when you say things like movement or, stuff like that. And what is a movement? It's, for this case, stuff like Black Lives Matters, to make sure that we're no longer systematically targeted by the system. What's the system? That's just a vague thing. Literally the system we built. Government, the laws that try to govern the country, and then the people who enforce it, the employers that look at certain histories. There is a comprehensive system that we want to cerebrally look at and change for the betterment of everyone, because the betterment of everyone has never been at the front of the minds of our government. That's why when people like the movement of Black Lives Matters, everything related to that, we're saying we're still fighting, and people say, for what? Because we don't see it as equal yet. The systemic problems still exist. Obviously, people of color have been targeted way higher than a lot of different groups of people. People who have more money can pretty much crap all over people who don't have money. So taking that all into consideration, you're not trying to fight capitalism with capitalism necessarily. Capitalism is socialism. That's why I support people like AOC and Bernie Sanders. That's why I support the Black Lives Matter movement, because they're all representatives of the revolution, which still goes on. So, hell, if you're trying to get equal rights, join the revolution. Join the revolution.
And this movie just keeps hammering you with the idea of legacy. And what is it that you want to leave behind as a legacy?
Yeah.
And you saw that in direct examples in the film when Fred, he was talking about, okay, my appeal to the Supreme Court of the state of Chicago was denied, or Illinois was denied. And what is my son going to know about me? What are people going to tell him about me? I'm never even going to get to meet him like I am now. And his wife had to come for him and say, hey, people will tell him the great things you've done at the very least. And again, Lakeith Stanfield's character, he's also worried about that. That's why he does the interview in 1989, years after, because he wanted people to know the truth. And again, it begs the question to us, the audience, of, well, again, you may have not experienced this directly and to the same level, but what's the legacy you want to leave behind for your kids or your people who like you in different communities? What is it you want to leave behind? Because that's important to think about. It's not all about how much I can get for myself. And you see that at the very end of the movie. It's tragic, but it reaffirms that point where William, in a little blurb after his final clip of him in the interview, talking about how people shouldn't judge him because, for better or for worse, he was in the movement and he was fighting, whereas some people don't even do that. And again, it talks about legacy. And yes, it says that he ends up killing himself after that interview. He commits suicide. But the sad part to me was that after he did all of that, right, he did it for his own interest. He didn't want to go to jail. And he was already introduced as a character who represents a lot of us who are just getting by and struggling to get by. What do they reward him with? They reward him with keys to a gas station, I think $200, and they say, hey, good work. Here, go make yourself some money, and goodbye. And that's it. Just coldly toss him away. He did all that for just a little bit better of a financial situation. And I feel that that's the scariest part of the film, because we still do it today, right? Everybody's worried about how much money they can make, about their own personal success. How do I put my own investments away? And these are important things to live comfortably, but they shouldn't be the sole reason for why you get up in the morning or motivate yourself to perhaps work in your community or go to your job or whatever it may be. There are higher things we should aspire to, especially when we're still suffering like we do as an overall society / community. So that part really hit me hard, but I did appreciate it because legacy to me is an important thing. What do I leave behind as a person? We do that in different ways, but it's something we should all consider. We shouldn't be so short-sighted, so narrow-minded to the point where selfish desires are the only thing we leave behind at the end of the day.
Yeah, because Lakeith's character, William, he had the hustle without the moral compass. So he just wanted to make his dollar literally any way he can. And some people do resort to things like that, and it is because of the system they're put in. But yeah, that's a difference, because obviously Lakeith's character in Fred Hampton's position, given all that money at the end to flee to Cuba or whatever he can, he would have taken that money. He would not have tried to use it for a medical clinic in the heart of the city of Chicago. He would have taken it and ran. That's what he wanted from the agents. And that's the thing, because we live in a world full of Judas, of different kind of breeds and variations. And the ones who are working to keep the system in place, because maybe, just maybe, they can get a piece of it too, those are the people to really try to reach, but also look out for, because we have this reward system of, if you support the capitalist ways of America to its purity, then maybe you can get rewarded too. And that's what a lot of people find comfort in, trying to protect people who might make 1% or 99% of all the riches and the 1% of the population, because they kind of have that aspiration of like, but that could be me. So I should fight for laws that could help me, the fictional version of me that's really rich. I want to protect that carrot on that stick. And it's designed for most people not to meet that carrot. You will never grasp it. It's a lottery. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to do what we can to, be comfortable, have everything we need, support things we love. We have to make money in the system, but we have to have that moral compass. Otherwise, you end up that Judas. You have to have in mind, beyond just making money, what else is important? What else could I be doing? Am I furthering the cause of something positive, or am I purely feeding into something that's eating the community, including me? So all great things this movie did a really good job at bringing up. And I want more movies like this. It's still Black History Month, and there's so many other black centric movies out there that have been made but should continue to be made. I would take 3 different versions of a Fred Hampton 2020s movie. Absolutely. I would take a deeper dive into Lakeith's character, because him committing suicide at the end, we know why he did, but that's just the life after ruining an entire movement for some degree. That character psyche is sincerely fucked, and that probably deserves research as well. But overall, this movie's great. I recommend it to literally everyone. And if you happen to be someone who I don't really support Black Lives Matter, or I don't see how any of this matters to me, while I do dislike you for who you are, I encourage you to look at movies like Judas and the Black Messiah or the Black Klansman. There are so many movies out there that if that's a way you can get information, watch the movie and keep an open mind to the characters in the front of the lines, because I think you'll find that we all really are trying to live under the same house, if you will. And if we can all have equal reaches to the fridge, water, heat, that we'll just be better off. And that's all we're trying to do, be on the same footing. But yeah, I had to rate this movie, 8 or 9 out of 10. It was excellent. And I definitely looking forward to Shaka King, I believe, directed this. Looking forward to what they do in the future.
I mean, you gotta have those basic human necessities. Heat, shelter, food. Simple stuff like that. You'd think we
That'd
get
be
it
nice.
now, but
That'd be nice.
A little more complicated, right?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. So I echo everything you said, man. The thing I really liked as well, and I just want it to be the last message of this episode from my side, at the very least, is you got to know your history, man. And I'm guilty of this too. I've spent a lot of years not caring about my past or my heritage and where I come from, and I've really taken the chance or the time to try to learn that stuff now, because in the beginning of the film, Lakeith's character, the FBI agent, asks him, "Hey, how did you feel when Martin Luther King Jr. died?" And he's like, I guess I kind of felt sad, but I don't really pay attention to that stuff." And that's the problem. He enjoyed hearing that, and the truth is, that's how they get the one up on us, is by us repeating history, doomed to repeat it over and over again if we don't try to learn from it. So my impression of it was that that's what the film was trying to tell me, and that's something I'm going to enact in my personal life even more. But anyone watching, if you agree with us or disagree with us, let us know in the comments section. If I had to rate this film, I'd probably be around the same as you, man. I'd be a little more generous. I'd say 9.5 out of 10. Just the cinematography was also beautiful. Man, just there wasn't anything in this film I didn't like. The time, it was a timepiece as well, because it took place in the 70s, and everything was very accurate from what I saw.
Yeah, I agree. The aesthetics are on point. It felt exactly of the time it came from. I agree.
Exactly. Yep. They did. Everything was just wonderfully done. They paid attention to very small details, and it showed. And I love when a movie can do that. And I think the last thing I just wanted to ask you, man, before we call it a wrap for this episode is, do you think, and this is going to be a weird year for Academy Awards because of COVID. There's really not a lot of contenders. I don't even know if they'll do it. But even if they don't do it, we'll do our ATA Awards for the Academy Award season. This is going to be right up there for me, man. I think this has potential to win Best Picture. This is probably one of the best movies I've seen this year, if not the best so far.
Trying to figure out the actual release date. So release date labeled February 12th. So a month and a half into the year, and I'm already doubting I'll see a movie better than this. It's like you're hearing it now in February. We'll definitely have ATA awards of the 2021 season for next year. The preview is probably this is going to be on the top of my list. Like, we're so early into the year, but that's how much we love this film. It's just seemed like one of those films that, of course, we need that message right now. We definitely need this film's message right now of the revolution lives on. The casualties will unfortunately pile up, but our belief of betterment of people will exist. And it wasn't even a movie that just kind of pandered to that idea. It just did a good job executing a historical drama set to times that parallel what's happening right now. So it's an excellent film. It's already, it's number one. So it's already the king of the hill. We'll see who can knock it off, if anyone. But hey, if you come close, you did a great job because it's a great film. But yeah, that was our review of Judas and the Black Messiah. It's available right now on HBO Max. Huge thumbs up to the movie. Check it out if you haven't. And if you want to check out more reviews from us After the Act boys, check us out on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube right here. Go ahead and subscribe. Ring that bell. You can get more ATA episodes, both live, and then a week later we'll be shoving them out on all those podcast platforms I mentioned. You can follow us on Facebook too, primarily for some more ATA updates. And you can find all of our work at malumpictures.com. We have another podcast called the Magic Conch Podcast, a little lighter, but we just talk about whatever you want to talk about. We also have some streaming we do on Twitch and YouTube, so our Malum gaming sector is really thriving right now. So if you want to see us fail at some video games, sometimes succeed, check us out on Twitch and YouTube as well. And until next time, you can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. Keep it going.
Are you a revolutionary? Think about that. Peace.
Peace.